What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Truth Addiction. This is the channel that deals with the disease of addiction and all the ways it manifests itself. I am a recovering addict, and my name is Brian. I suffer from a disease which is incurable, progressive, and sometimes fatal. It can, however, be arrested at some point, and recovery is then possible. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the channel. Welcome home, right? So today I'm going to do the second part of my 4-part series on the 12 steps of a recovery program. Now, if you remember from the first one, or if you did watch the first one, or maybe you didn't, let me refresh your mind. It goes like this. Today we're going to do steps 4, 5, and 6. I already did 1, 2, and 3. If you get a chance, check that out if you haven't already. But these are the steps to a 12-step recovery program. The steps stay the same through any 12-step program, except for a couple words here and there. For the main one, it's in the first step, and that's just about what you're powerless over, what your particular twist was, and what particular program that you walked into, the one you can relate to the most. So here, and the other kind of changes are, I wrote today that I made a searching, I admitted I was entirely, right? Most of them will say something like we made, or it'll just cut out the I. Well, actually, I don't know if there is an I, but there'll be no we, and it'll just start from made a searching, admitted to God, was entirely ready, so on and so on. So the reason that I wanted to do this was because when I first got clean, I remember looking up at steps on a board or something when I was at a meeting. And I remember some of these words bugging me out, man. They bugged me out. And some of them I thought were kind of simple, just looking at them face value. And I had no idea what they meant inside of the actual literature of whatever program you go into. So with that said, if you can do me a favor before I get into these, that's like the video for me, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And dig this. I don't know much, but I know these steps. So let's get into this. Step 4, I made it a searching and fearless moral inventory of myself, right? Seems pretty self-explanatory. Searching, basically, I'm on a mission to find some shit, right? And I'm going to be fearless while I'm looking for that shit. Meaning I shall leave no stone unturned. Hopefully, that's what you do. And what am I doing? I'm making a moral inventory of myself, right? So when I came into my particular program, I came in with a hole in my chest, a spiritual void, if you will, the size of fucking Pennsylvania, bro. And in that hole was a bunch of shit. There was sexual abuse. There was relationship issues. There was all kinds of fear involved. There was guilt. There was shame. I mean, the list went on, man. So going through my first 3 steps and getting to this step, I realized that in order for me to fill that hole with some good shit, like honesty, righteousness, and freedom, that I needed to excavate that hole, right? Because in order to fill it with some good shit, I had to empty it first. And that's what this step does for you. This step right here, by the time you hit here, you should have a sponsor. I mean, I hope you wasn't sponsoring yourself through the first 3. But you should have a sponsor, and your sponsor is going to have you grab your pen, grab your paper, and go in. And when I mean go in, I mean take an internal look at myself, right? And go in there and find out who are the people I harmed, right? What am I harboring this guilt and shame for, right? Is it real guilt and shame, first of all? Like, was it somebody that I harmed? Or was it in a situation like in my case, because I've done a 4-step today and I'm free, I can actually say this shit on YouTube right now. I was molested by another man when I was 8, 9 years old. And for a while, I felt guilty and shameful, like it was my fault. Come to find out, I had no part in that, right? So I learned that shit. So we have like some kind of fictitious guilt and shame, and then we find out we have some real shit that we got to deal with, right? Because we've hurt some people, mentally, physically, however you want to put it, man. And so I had to go in with that. And I'll give you just a real quick thing. In the middle of my 4-step, I had about a couple years clean, and it was Thanksgiving, and I was in this kind of recovery house. It wasn't actually a recovery house. It was like a boarding recovering house kind of. But anyway, my bedroom had a deck. It was about 2-3 stories up, a deck outside of my door. So I'm on Thanksgiving Day, and I'm writing on the middle of my 4-step, and I hit the part about where I'm writing about my kids, right? Now, I used until the point that I could no longer have my kids, right? My kids just couldn't be in my life because I just couldn't stop using, right? So I got to a point where I kind of just put the fucking pen down and was like, what's the fucking point of this whole clean thing and recovery and all this other shit? What do I even deserve any kind of shit for, since I did that kind of trash ass shit, right? And I remember contemplating going out and jumping off that deck, doing a straight up motherfucking swan dive head first and just kill myself. And that was with years clean, right? Well, right before that, I had asked the higher power, hey man, what should I do? Basically, I just kind of like, I'm about to do this. What you got to say? And then, a weird ass thing happened. And I'm not a mystical type dude, but it just so happens that I got a phone call right at that moment. And it was a dude that I worked with, this young boy. And he ain't in recovery. He wasn't none of that. He just worked with me. And he was like, hey man, come downstairs. I got something for you. So I go downstairs and he's got a bunch of Thanksgiving food, right? Piece of pie, all this shit. And then so he gives me the food and he gives me that shake, kind of handshake hug. And he goes, hey man, my brother died from this disease. And I'm proud of you. And I want you to know that you're giving hope to people, right? So in that moment, as I walked back up the steps, needless to say, I picked that fucking pen back up and I went in. And I made a vow that day that I will stay clean. And if I can't have my kids back in my life yet, then I'm going to do something about fucking this disease. And I'm going to spread that message any way I can. You know what I mean? Because from that day on, that was about 4 years ago, it's always been about redemption. Every day for me is about redeeming myself to the people around me and society at large, because I owe them all that, right? So this is what you're doing here. You're going in, you're going to pull out that deep, dark shit that you really don't want nobody to fucking know, or you don't even want to talk about it. And you're going to write it down and you're going to watch them words come off of that paper. And you're going to read that shit back to yourself, man. And you're going to get fearless and you're going to get searching. I mean, search everywhere in your motherfucking self. Because the more you search, the more fearless you are, the freer you become. So that's what you're doing here. Let me go in myself real quick and find out all this nasty shit I've done to people and all the nasty shit that's been done to me, and let me write it down, because I got a step right here that I'm about to go into. And that brings us step 5. I admitted to God, to myself, and to another human being the exact nature of my wrongs. Now, I just realized that I wrote human and I didn't add being to it. So I don't want you to think like it's like another human, like, maybe you'd be doing this with like a cat or a dog or a fucking monkey or something, right? So I just fucked up the wording, but it should say human being, all right? So what are we doing in this step? First, let me put this out there. When you do this step, you're going to think about this step. And this step could prevent you from doing this step. If that doesn't make any sense, let me explain. You can find yourself writing all that deep, dark shit that you got inside of you. And then you kind of glance over to the next step real quick and you see this part right here. Another human being. See, most of us are cool with admitting it's God, to ourselves, the things we've done, but to another human being. See, and for me, that's where the freedom came, was admitting it to another human being, right? So you can get caught up on that. So what they say basically, and probably any program will tell you this that you go into is, do this step as if this step did not exist, right? Just get it done. Don't be bullshitting. Don't let your disease give you all kinds of motherfucking reasons not to do this shit. Because at the end of the day, your disease wants you lonely, in a corner, in a fucking fetal position, crying and bitching with nobody around you, right? So here we go, 5th step. Now, here goes that God word. I was bugged the fuck out when I seen these words in these steps, like God, and Him, and His, right? But what I come to find out is, it's a God of my understanding. It's how I see the higher power, right? So if you do have a deity, maybe you rock out with Jesus, Krishna, Allah, Yahweh, whatever, there's plenty of them. Then this step is that part of this step's pretty simple for you. You know what I mean? Because as far as you're concerned, that God probably already got you here. You're only clean and alive because that God was in your life anyway. So here we go, right? So, and then you go to myself. I got to admit it to myself. Now, initially, that sounds kind of fucking stupid. Like, well, I wrote this shit. I wrote this shit in this 4th step that I'm about to admit. I already know what the fuck I said, so I don't even understand what that means. What that basically means is this. You remember when you were using or doing whatever it was that was making your life unmanageable and tearing your fucking life apart? And how people would come up to you and say, hey man, I think you got a drug problem. And you kind of be like, yeah, probably, or probably not, I don't know. Well, you didn't do anything about it just because people were coming up and telling you that shit. You only did something about it when you looked yourself in the fucking mirror and you admitted to yourself, I had a problem, I need help. So that's kind of the same thing what's going on in this fucking step right here, right? And now, so what you're doing is, I had, with me, the other human being was my sponsor. And most programs, that's what it'll be. When you enter your 12-step recovery program, you're going to find a sponsor. They all have them. And a sponsor is going to guide you through these, right? And that's usually who you do your 4th step with, your 4th and 5th step with, is your sponsor. Although, you can do it with like a best friend. You can do it with a total stranger. If you're religious, you can do it with a priest or whatever they would call the person that represents your God in your religion. You know what I'm saying? And you can do that. I recommend you do it with your sponsor because at this point, you should have gained some trust in that person, right? They've guided you so far to this. And not only that, the shit that you go to tell them, like all that rotten shit, you're going to find that they're going to turn around and tell you rotten shit that they did. And it's going to make you feel better about it, about doing this thing, right? So in this step right here is filled with a whole bunch of trust. And it's filled with a whole bunch of fucking willingness. And most of all, courage. Straight up courage is developed doing this fucking step right here. And what you're trying to find is the exact nature of my wrongs. In other words, I robbed $20 from my mother. Why did I do that? Well, I had a drug habit. But you don't stop there and you go, why do you have a drug habit? So here's the exact nature of that situation is because I have a disease of the mind. And my thinking is fucked up. It has become instinctual for me to use a drug or a slot machine or a fucking Amazon package. Whatever it is, it has become instinctual for me to do it. And I do have a disease, not a moral dilemma. That is the exact nature of why I've done the things I do. And then you have the exact nature where it's kind of like, what's the defect going on, right? What's the defect that's happening? that's making you act out like this, that's making you act out on those behaviors, right? So you have a couple ways to look at the exact nature thing. So in a nutshell, you went in and searched for that bullshit inside of you. You pulled it out. Then you went down and you sat down with the God of your understanding, yourself, and your human being. It was my sponsor. Hopefully it's yours, but that's up to you. And your human being, and you went over the exact nature of your fucking wrongs. And I will tell you this, for any recovering person, this is a turning point in your recovery. This is a whole nother level of fucking freedom, bro. And I hope you find it, man. So then that brings us to step 6. I was entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Now, when I first seen this step, before I got to it, I thought, okay, this is going to be the day that I take all my fucked up ways, right? And I hand them over to the higher power so I can just be this perfect person. Well, guess what? That ain't what the fuck happened. Not at all, right? See, because some people get this step fucked up. And they look at it and they go, this to them it means I was ready to have all my defects of character, I gave them away, and they were gone. That's not how it goes. But anyway, we got that God word over here again. I mean, we should be clear on how I feel about that. You should be cool by now. Whether you have the deed or you don't, you should be cool with that word by now if you've been listening to what the fuck I'm saying. Anyway, let's proceed. I was entirely ready. I could tell you this. This doesn't seem like it implies a lifelong process, but it do. But it does, but it do, but it does. Right? All these defects of character. Hey, man. I realized when I did this step that I had a lot of fucked up defects of character, dude. I had things that were defects of character that I swore were fucking assets to me. I swore they were assets. But come to find out, nah, they were fucked up defects of character. And you know, on the flip side of that, I had a couple defects that I thought were defects of character that were actually assets. So you know what I mean? Get you a recovery program and do some step work and you can find out crazy shit like that too. You know what I mean? But anyway, what you're doing here is you're going in and you're trying to find out what the fuck makes you tick, right? And in this step, this is where you're going to start to fucking finally feel some fucking humility. This is going to put you in a state of humbleness. For me personally, I almost got arrested in the middle of my 6th step because I was acting out like a motherfucker, man. I started looking at hey, when you start looking at your fucking self and seeing some fucked up shit, that fucked up ways that you got, all that shit that you blamed on somebody else, and you all of a sudden you realize, damn, that might have been me. I think I was to blame for that shit. Yo, that shit fucks you up, right? So you go through that. And I remember I was on, man, listen, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but you know what I mean? I was on a motherfucking Huffy bike at 3 o'clock in the morning with a motherfucking switchblade in the back of my pocket with like 3-4 years clean over some chick. Just acting out, right? But my higher power intervened and it didn't go down like that. So I just want you to know, for me personally, my defects of character, they get worked on every day, little by little, but they have not been removed. They have lessened. There's some that I don't have anymore. Like, or not that I might not don't have them, but they rarely pop up anymore. But make no mistake about it, they will pop up on your ass, right? But it's all about how you handle it today and in a sense of awareness. Because that's the other gift you get in this step. It shall be probably, if you're like me, your second greatest gift of recovery. The first being the gift of desperation. And through this step, you will acquire the gift of awareness. And what a freeing thing it is to be aware. See, it's one thing when you're walking around all ignorant to some shit. But once you're aware of it, you can address it. Right? So what you're doing here is you're going back in. As a matter of fact, usually when people do this 6th step here, they got to review their 4th, which actually fucking sucks. But you got to review that shit. So anyway, but you're going to find out. You're going to make a list of your character defects. You might even go around and ask the people you hang with, like, hey, man, tell me a defect of character of mine. You should try that shit. But anyway, that's what you're going to do here. So if I can just ball it all up real quick. Steps 4, 5, and 6. You're going to go in, you're going to find some shit out about yourself. You're going to pull all that dark, cold, crazy shit out of you. You're going to expose it to the fucking light. How are we doing that? We're exposing it to the light of God, to yourself, and to another human being. And I promise you, it will die in that light. It will absolutely at least lessen for you, and you become freer. Then you get over here to step 6, and you start to find out, what am I doing, right? How do I act or behave when certain things happen, right? When I don't get what I want, or I'm trying to manipulate a situation, because you'll start to become aware of how you do that through way of writing this. And that kind of awareness and humbleness will take you right into step 7. And we'll get to that in the next video. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, man. I appreciate y'all watching. I hope I helped somebody. Maybe I did some kind of fucking enlightenment. I don't know. But you know what? Leave me a comment, man. Maybe you could fucking enlighten me. You know what I mean? Hit me with something I don't fucking know. Because I don't know everything. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, that's going to do it for me. Listen. The disease of addiction is broad. And it's outside of the realm of just using drugs. Keep coming back. More will be revealed, man.